Welcome back to Natural Beauty Summit's Love and Babies, a Health Journey. I'm your host, Salome Sallehy, founder of Sugar Wax, and this here is my co-host, Angela Chang, founder of Emdash Beauty. Today's conversation is about post-birth control syndrome and nutrition. So Angela, tell us about our guest.
Today's guest is Jess Bippen. She is a registered dietitian and the author of the popular blog Nourished by Nutrition, where she takes a science-based approach to nutrition and wellness, diving into all the ways that nutrition impacts hormone imbalances.
Now, for any of you who have spent any time on birth control pills or any other birth control methods, and your doctor has told you that, oh, it's fine, it's not going to affect you, it's not going to affect your hormones, it's totally safe and inconsequential, you're going to want to listen to this, because post-birth control syndrome is a real thing, and it could be affecting your health and fertility. So stay tuned for my conversation with Jess Bippen. Welcome to Natural Beauty Summit's Love and Babies, a Health Journey. Today I'm chatting with Jess Bippen, registered dietitian, and we're going to be talking about food, diet, hormones, the whole gamut, and we're going to be talking a little bit about birth control as well. So welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to see you. Now, you've had quite the journey with your pregnancy, and I love how you shared it. And I thought it was fascinating how food was really how that played a role and how that was woven into your story. And I'd like to start this conversation with post-birth control syndrome. Because in my time, it was definitely something that a lot of us experienced, but there wasn't even a word for it. So what is it? And based on your experience, what kind of impact did it have on your body?
Of course, I love this question because I think that it's a topic that's getting talked about more, which I love, but it was not talked about a lot. And I don't think, one, the symptoms of what people are experiencing didn't have a name. So now there's a name for it. But also, women have been on birth control for so long that, let's say they're on it for 9 or 10 years. Well, we don't really know the long-term effects. Yes, it's considered safe, but then when all these women are coming off of it 10, 15 years later, there's a difference than if you were just on it for a month or a year. So post-birth control syndrome is really this term used to explain the symptoms that arise after a woman goes off birth control. And these symptoms can range from skin issues like acne or rosacea to losing your period or just not having your period come back after stopping, hair loss, other concerns like adrenal problems, anxiety. But then when those are also coupled with the effects that the pill itself has on you, it turns into this really big health concern and this health issue that women are having and don't really have answers for. So a lot of times they get put back on birth control as oh, we'll regulate your cycle again, but it's not doing anything for that woman who may eventually want to try to conceive, who wants just to have a regular cycle. It's not addressing those underlying issues of what's going on. Because essentially when you take birth control, it's shutting down your reproductive system. It's not allowing you to ovulate so that you can't get pregnant. But when you stop it, it takes a little while, or it can take a while in most women, for that system to work again. So you kind of have to re-jump the car, but it doesn't automatically start right away. And so it's really trying to get to the root cause of why isn't your system starting back up? Is it due to like mineral and vitamin deficiency? So your nutrient stores, are you having issues with gut health? Is it the inflammation in the body? So it's really tackling like what is going on and what has the birth control done to your body and addressing that. So my experience with that was I was on birth control for about 9 years. I started like, I don't know, sophomore year of high school, heavy periods, inconvenient cramps,
or like acne so often.
Yeah, acne. I think I had breakouts. So it was like, oh, of course I'm going to go on this. Lighter periods, better skin. Why not? Yeah. And then you just stayed on it. You didn't know that I was never told the side effects or long-term side effects, or even how to like optimize my health while I was on that to kind of prevent any side effects or reduce them in a way. So once I stopped, this was like 2017. I have also been with my boyfriend since going into junior year of high school. So we had been together for a really long time. We knew we were going to get married. We were talking about having a family. And I knew a really big piece of that, obviously, was your menstrual cycle. Like you have to have a menstrual cycle to have a family, to have a baby, but I wasn't. So after I stopped birth control, I didn't get my period back for 2 years. And I had seen gynecologists, OBGYNs, whatever.
And what would they tell you? How would they explain
simply would tell me to go back on the pill. Like, oh, your hormone levels are like a little unbalanced. They're low. We need to regulate your cycle. You need to go back on the pill. But my problem with that was if I want to start a family soon, I can't do that while on birth control. And then it's not addressing the issue. So if I go back off again, are you just going to tell me to go back on it? And they're like, no, you can do IVF or we can look into other options. There was never something about, well, let's figure out.
And at this point, how old are you when they're saying this?
My God, like 24.
Yeah. Which is like, you're like right before the fertile peak of your life, right?
Yes, exactly. And I did get married young. I got married at 25. I had my son, oh my gosh, maybe a little later than that. I got married at 26. I had my son at 28. I'm 30 now. I'm going to have my second baby soon. But it took me a really long time to heal my body and get answers. And I can't imagine just the people who go in blindly, not knowing anything about hormone health, anything about nutrition, and just taking what their doctor is saying to them as the end all be all. Whereas I had questions and I was like, this is not the answer. And I like kind of stuck up for myself and said, see you, I will go find a new doctor. I will get to the root cause of this. So I did a lot of research on my own, but I also did invest in a functional medicine practitioner here in my area because I knew that for me, IVF wasn't the answer. It was like, let's get this jump started. Yes. Like, why am I not having a period? And it did take a lot of like diet related, supplement related healing to restore my nutrients, a lot of like reducing stress, changing up my exercise habits, and just tweaking my lifestyle so that I could optimize my body, make sure that it was performing how it was supposed to. And then my period eventually did come back. And it took me a very short time after return to get pregnant.
Yeah. And, I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I think one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show to talk about this is because throughout Natural Beauty Summit, we talk about balancing hormones and hormone health because, it affects everything from like the integrity of your tissues to every function in your body. And a lot of times when we talk about that, we talk about like the external factors, like what you're putting on your skin, the hormone disruptors, lifestyle, home, like cleaning products, like all of those things. And I think like what we're starting to now uncover are some of these places where you don't expect to get bad advice, like the doctor's office. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I know, and I have also been there where doctors are like, go on the birth control pill. It's great, great. Like you won't cramp, like, or like my cousin, like it's going to clear up your skin or this or that. And it's totally safe. But then like when you're putting hormones in your body, you're reducing your body is adapting, right? So your body doesn't feel like the need to produce more hormones in a balanced way because it's relying now on this constant feeding of it.
Yes.
And the side effects, like if you read what those side effects are in the birth control pill, it's like terrifying, but like it's somehow culturally just dismissed because a doctor said, it's fine, it's safe, do it.
Yes, exactly. And the amount of people who have actually been told those side effects is like maybe 1%. I don't think anyone knowingly goes out of that doctor's office being like, oh my gosh, but this could happen to me, my gut health, like like the list goes on and on. If you really open up the brochure, it's like bigger than your body.
Yeah. And I think like I kind of consider myself lucky because I had so many reactions to the pill itself that it was just like choosing like the lesser of the evils. It's like, okay, have really heavy periods or like get really bad migraines. You know what I mean? Like no one's winning here. So just one less thing to do. So I didn't stay on them as long as I did. And I think the other thing is like the birth control methods and therapies that are available now are terrifying because I talk to girls who like haven't had their period for like years.
Right.
That's crazy.
And especially since a cycle is a woman's like fifth vital sign, it like is so important. And it's not talked about or taught early enough that like this is something that it should be like cherished and something that like you can really look into as a component of your health. Like this will tell you things about your health, and tweaking things here and there can make it really not horrible. Like it doesn't have to be horrible.
No, it's actually not horrible. It's a beautiful thing. One of the things that I'm learning now, or relearning, I should say, from like older cultures and older wisdom is that, you know, your monthly moon cycle or whatever you want to call it, it's like, it's a really important milestone in everything from like your emotional state, your physical state. It's a detox mechanism. There's so many things, but I'm going to call you out, patriarchy, but the patriarchy keeps telling us that the period is bad, like it should be covered and hidden and like forgotten in a way. And, you know, I talk to a lot of like healers and they're like, oh my gosh, like that the blood from the period is actually like to be celebrated because it's so nutrient dense and it's so life-giving. Like you could use it as fertilizer in your garden. I mean, I'm not suggesting that y'all need to go that far, but like, I think it's a shift in paradigm. Like, why are we thinking that the period is so bad that it needs to be repressed, that it's so inconvenient because I can't do all the things, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that has come from modern society first of all, of periods getting like PMS symptoms getting so bad. Whereas maybe before, when there weren't all these environmental toxins, when women weren't struggling with estrogen dominance and excess prostaglandins and all these other things that are contributing to horrible cycles or premenstrual cycles, that is all tied into why it's been viewed as so bad and so horrible. And like, if we have this magic fix, like a pill to take to get rid of
it'll just make it go away.
Right. Yeah. So,
I love that you said it's like the fifth vital sign. I had never heard that term, and
yeah,
it makes so much sense because everything from like the color to the texture of the blood is so telling of what's going on inside of our bodies.
that, and same with like your temperature rise. So that's a way to naturally plan as like a birth control, tracking your temperature, knowing when you ovulate, because you can only get pregnant a few days out of the month during that ovulation period. So knowing your temperature, and if you are ovulating, your temperature will shift afterwards. If you're not, it won't. But that is a very important sign too. So if your basal body temperature is way too low, that can signal that there's something wrong with the hormonal endocrine system, possibly thyroid. Maybe your metabolism isn't as strong. It's not firing up as it should. So those are all clues as to like maybe what's going on inside of you. So that's why I really love using that term.
Yeah. And, I think like people choose whether they want to have a baby. And I don't think I just want to clarify that we're not sitting here trying to tell people like have your period so you can have a baby. I think we're talking about the period as a marker of health.
Yes.
And we're talking about birth control pills as, how that impacts your health. And one of the things that you talk about is how the hormonal effect of the birth control pill actually depleted your nutrients. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course. And I want to touch back on the one thing you just said. And when I shared this post about hormonal birth control affecting your nutrient status, it's definitely not saying like you can't be on the pill. That is definitely your choice. You have, the right to choose, but you also have the right to know what's going on. And I don't think that's relayed in a doctor's office. Like they don't tell you what could happen in terms of side effects. They count on you to read those things, and no one does. So it's just kind of lost. And then things happen and you're like, wait, why am I feeling so bad? But if this was told to women up front, they could do something about it. So yes, the hormonal birth control may deplete your nutrients. If you decide to stay on it, well, great. Here is a way you can eat or supplement to kind of counterbalance that. But it's just about informed consent. And I don't think we're getting that. So in terms of what the pill depletes, it's actually a really long list. It's like,
okay, before you get into the long list, I just want to add something else to what you just said. And in fairness to the doctors, I mean, doctors are, kind of tasked to, let's say, like save our lives, right? Like save us from like critical things. And, when you think about it from a practical point of view, like maybe it's not in the interest of society at large for a doctor to spend an hour to sit there and explain everything to you because they need to see the next patient, the next patient, the next patient, because typically when we go to the doctors for urgent things. But I think like what you did, which was advocating for yourself, but also seeking the help of a functional medicine practitioner, like their role is to optimize health, and they're not saving your life. Like they're not cutting the cancer out, but they are doing more of that. So I think like understanding we're not like doctors are bad. They're great. But I think like maybe we need to like think about our health beyond just the doctor's office.
Yes. And educating ourselves like in different ways, getting this information out there so that it becomes more well known. That all is helpful because then you can ask questions.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you. Let's get into the long list because I think this surprised me and it's fascinating.
Yes. So it really does take a toll on the nutrients that go through your body. So supporting your body is really crucial. But some nutrients to pay attention to are the B vitamins, specifically like folate, riboflavin, the B6, B12, your vitamin C, your vitamin E, D, and then minerals like selenium, zinc, and magnesium. And a lot of this has to do with what or how the pill affects gut health. So the way it disrupts the microbiome or causes inflammation in there, it would also be a good idea to think about a probiotic or eating probiotic and prebiotic rich foods, fiber rich foods to really help nourish the gut to support your body during that period of time. So just in general, like your
just to kind of touch on that, because we do talk about gut health a lot in this summit, and how important it is. And I think, for our audience to understand that the way that it disrupts your gut's, microbiome is partially because when you take an ingested hormone, it gets filtered through your liver. So the amount of medicine that's actually going into your digestive system and through your digestive system is quite a bit heavier than what ends up in your bloodstream. Yeah. And that in and of itself is throwing your microbiome off and saying, hey, what's going on here? We're getting this big hit of something. And I think it's Dr. Gundry that talks about, even like Tylenol or ibuprofen. It's like, I love this analogy. So I think about it every time I'm going to take something. It's like dropping a nuclear bomb into your gut. Now, maybe a birth control pill doesn't have that same effect, but everyone's guts are also different. So
yes. And so many things affect the gut lining nowadays with the environment and the chemicals and everything that we're consuming that, of course, one person may be just fine. They may not feel the effects as drastically. And then another person, it may like totally derail them.
Now, you talk about food and nutrition playing a big role in your fertility journey. I would love for you to share some advice with women who are at each stage of conception, like pre-conception, when you're getting ready, when you're pregnant, post-birth, like what are some of your guiding?
So I think you could always tweak this just a little bit depending on what stage, but in general, you can create a very wholesome diet that can get you through each stage. And this is really based on a whole food, nutrient rich diet, which I think is like the best place to start. You want one that is, personally, I don't think meat free. So like vegan is the optimal way to go. I've experimented there. And the more research I've done, the more nutrient dense and the more protein rich a diet can be, it's better for blood sugar. But that doesn't mean that I'm discounting plants. I think a very plant forward way of eating is exceptional, and it's going to give you the vitamins, the nutrients, the minerals, all of the antioxidants, the fiber that we need. So the more plants, the better, but not plant exclusive. That's truly, I think, the best place to start. And then focusing on the whole nutrient dense foods, of course, while you eliminate or minimize, I should say, the processed foods, the oils that can be inflammatory, the added sugars. And I'll say that I want to preface that by saying, I don't mean that you can never have those. I think you have to find a balance between incorporating as many of the nutrient dense foods as possible, and then mindfully choosing when something has those things, when you're going to consume it. Because I've been there. I've been obsessed with eating healthy and restricting food groups or certain foods because they were unhealthy, but it's really about finding your unique balance. And I don't just say balance lightly, because I think it can mean different things for different people, depending on what stage of life you're in, depending on if you have different conditions. Like if you have an inflammatory condition, you may be more mindful about your inflammatory oil and sugar consumption. Whereas if you feel optimal, your nutrient stores and everything, your labs are great, you may have a little bit more flexibility because your body's a little bit more resilient. So you have to find out what works for you, but really focusing on like adding in all of the good things is going to carry you so much farther than restricting. So I think that's the best approach for eating well through any stage of your life.
Now, as a nutritionist and someone who has also struggled with eating disorders, I think you have a really unique vantage point. And one of the things that you've said is, I choose to think of it as an opportunity to nourish my body, enjoy the flavors, and embrace how wonderful it makes me feel about eating and food. And which I thought was like such a powerful paradigm, because like, sometimes we think of like food as like fuel. Sometimes we think of it as for pleasure. And, I really love your approach to that. So how did you get to that? And like, for someone who has never thought of food in that way, like what's a good starting point to be more mindful of like how we're eating, even the mindset?
Yeah. So my shift, it was almost like a light switch went off. But for me, the biggest thing was when I didn't have my period and I wanted a family, that like nourishing my body and not having my body in an optimal place due to nutrient deficiencies, being overly restrictive, it wasn't giving me the life I wanted. Mm-hmm. And then I knew I had to change. Like it was just this wake up call that I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just about me anymore. Like, takes two people to make a family. Once I have this family, it's almost like selfish. Like I just felt like I wasn't doing myself, but I wasn't doing the people I loved any favors. Mm. So that was like my realization and wake up call. And then it took a long time to, like switch the habits, of course, but little by little, I shifted how I thought about food by being mindful and asking myself, how do I want to feel today? Is this going to nourish my body? And consciously choosing and making an effort to enjoy what I was choosing. And I think that was key because it didn't mean that I couldn't have anything. It just meant, do I really want this? And if the answer was yes, then I would mindfully enjoy it instead of having this mentality like, oh, I can't have it, or something is off limits, because that just backfires. Then you want it more,
and then you're obsessively thinking about it.
Or it just it's not a healthy relationship. So the less pressure I took off myself to be this like idea I had of a perfect person or a perfect way of eating, the more flexible and free I became with food, which actually strengthened my relationship with the food, but also just how I felt in general. So I think a very interesting concept or whatever is that the stress in your body that you have about food, or really in anything, but people, when they obsess over food, the stress that they have about that situation is actually causing more of the symptoms than that food actually would.
Yeah.
So,
like, oh, I'm not doing it right. And then you're getting all out of shape. Like, oh, I didn't do it perfectly. I missed this. I was going to do
yes, but that can truly cause like digestive issues. And like people say, oh my gosh, I'm so bloated after I ate that pasta. Well, are you really bloated because you ate the pasta, or are you really bloated because you are stressing out about eating the pasta?
That's a great question.
Not mindfully eating it, or maybe you're scarfing it down because you're like, I'm never going to have this pasta again because I'm allowing myself to have it right now. So if people allowed themselves to have it, ate in a relaxed way, ate until they were like, full, but not overly full, would it really cause you the bloating? So I mean, some people it might, but most often than not, probably not. And you'd feel 100% better.
You know what you just said really reminded me of like when I'm on vacation and I'm not restricting myself and I'll eat whatever I want and I won't even worry about it for a second. And sometimes I feel like I eat like a maniac, like I eat a lot, but like somehow I end up coming back like thinner.
Yeah. Or you just feel better. You have more energy and like you don't have the digestive issues and you're like, how does that even work? But I think it's so true. But your body and your like the way, if you're in flight or fight mode when you're eating, or if you're in that parasympathetic state where you're just like calm and relaxed, like I'm on vacation, I'm enjoying life, or you're eating in between a meeting that you're so stressed about, that really affects how your body functions.
Like you just totally gave me an insight because I'm just thinking about like, you know, sometimes I'll have like a really busy morning like I did today and I'll like have a protein shake and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to eat something like in between my meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I do, the way I eat it is certainly not the way you described. Like I am choosing this. I'm going to enjoy it. It's like, oh my God, I need to do this and move on. And I always feel awful after.
Yeah.
Like in my body, not like I don't feel awful emotionally.
Yes.
I feel like bloated and like like I'm not digesting the food because my body and my mind didn't even acknowledge that I'm sitting down to have food.
To have a meal. Yes. Yes. It's best to eat in that relaxed state in which we can't do that all the time. I mean, it's best to try to do that. So a challenge for everyone listening to just try at least one meal a day, sit without distractions. That's so hard nowadays because we have our phone, but really like look at your meal. What colors is it made up of? What are the real flavors? Are you like chewing your food?
Yes.
Or you're swallowing it?
I love this challenge. Do it, guys. Do it for a week, one meal a day for a week and see if it makes a difference.
I bet it will. And I bet you'll want to do it for every meal.
Yeah. Cause it makes it more enjoyable.
It does.
Now I know I keep asking you these questions cause I almost want you to be prescriptive about like, do this before pregnancy. And now I'm appreciating that like, there is no such answer because we're also all different and going through different things. So there's no one.
I will say though, with the preconception, usually food isn't enough. So the stage of your life during preconception period, pregnancy, even like that postpartum period, breastfeeding period, you more often than not need to supplement on top of that just because it's such a just depleting stage. Your nutrient needs are just so much higher. So the ideal range of starting supplementation is from like 3 to 6 months out before trying to conceive. And I know that doesn't always possible for people. So if you're thinking of trying to get pregnant in the future, just keep that in mind that to optimize nutrition stores so you don't become depleted with baby or like after baby, it's really important to like start ahead of time.
I totally agree. And I think that even applies to exercise because when you're pregnant, like you're working out in a different way and you're not really working out like the way you used to. So like build that muscle mass because you're going to lose some throughout a pregnancy.
Yes. The muscle mass is so, so important because goodness, everything feels like 100 times heavier when you're pregnant.
Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned seed cycling as a method to start balancing hormones. And I thought that the way you described it was so approachable. Like I've read about seed cycling and it always seems so complex. And like, I'd love for you to just share that tip with our audience.
Yes. This is my favorite, like easy ways to just hone in on like food as a nutrient. Like they're already packaged up so perfectly. And if you, the more you incorporate them, the better. So seed cycling is basically just a practice, a habit, if you will, of eating seeds specific seeds during the 2 phases of your cycle. So, or the 2 main ones. So you have your follicular phase and then your luteal phase. And during the follicular phase, it's when you eat the pumpkin and flax seeds. So like for a 14-day period is ideal. I know
starting at
the day you bleed.
Yeah.
So starting at the day you bleed until ovulation. And I know it's not 14 days for everyone, but for consistency, it's better to just like kind of focus on that 14-day period. And then from ovulation until the end of your cycle, from the day you start bleeding again, is the luteal phase. And that's when you eat the sunflower and the sesame seeds.
Can you talk about the science of that? Like why those specific seeds and how that helps the hormones?
Yes. So the flax and the pumpkin seeds are during that first phase, and the flax contain lignans, which help bind to excess estrogen. So this helps like when your estrogen is going to start rising during that phase to like kind of tame it down. So you don't go into the second phase completely estrogen dominant. And then the pumpkin seeds are high in zinc, which helps support progesterone production, which is crucial after you ovulate in order to, if you want to get pregnant, have a baby, but also just keep your menstrual cycle flowing normally and naturally, regularly. And then during that second phase of your cycle, the sesame and sunflower, they help boost the progesterone production. So the sesame seeds are also rich in zinc, and then they contain some lignans too, which can help with the estrogen and making sure that your estrogen to progesterone ratio isn't imbalanced. And then the sunflower seeds are a really great source of vitamin E and selenium. So the vitamin E is again great for progesterone production, and the selenium can help the liver support that detoxification of excess estrogen.
Yeah.
So obviously other seeds and other foods have like vitamins and minerals and everything, but seed cycling is just a really easy way to hone in on those specific nutrients. You know that they're in there, and they're also really easy to incorporate. So like sprinkling them on a salad, putting them in a smoothie, putting them in yogurt or avocado toast, it just makes it really easy. So like 2 tablespoons in a day of like the pumpkin and flax, and then 2 tablespoons a day of the sunflower and sesame. There's a really cool company out there called Bia, who does it for you.
Oh.
They grind it, they package it together. They include, I think, hemp and chamomile to help with any PMS symptoms that you might be experiencing, or to help reduce inflammation. But if you don't want to buy the seeds, and then it's better if they're ground, especially flax.
Yes. I was going to ask you about that.
Yes. Flax is better ground. If it's whole, your body really can't absorb the nutrients and everything. So instead of taking the time to grind it,
break down the casing, right? Like
they just kind of stay whole. So your body can't break through the little shell. But that's just one easy way to do it. And then you have enough for one half of your cycle, and you have enough for the second half of your cycle. But it can be done during any stage of your life. If you're not getting your period, I get that question a lot about seed cycling. If you're not getting a period, you can follow the moon phases.
Oh.
So, truly, it doesn't really matter when you start, if it's new moon, full moon, but you can go by, so like 14 days, because the moon cycle is like a 28-day.
Yeah.
So you can just follow that. And I always get asked when I start. You can start anytime.
It started at a full moon, would you say?
What?
You can start the cycle on a full moon.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So typically how ancient wisdom has gone is full moon is when women typically ovulate, because it's light out. It'd be easier to see, or even animals it better for ovulation. You can see your partner, just the light is there. So that would kind of be when ovulation would occur. So you would kind of start like the sesame and sunflower at that point. And then the new moon, which would be when it's like nothing, or just starting, would be that first phase of the cycle.
Gotcha. Awesome.
I might be saying that wrong because I'm not like an expert on moon phases.
Yeah. So I think you mean full moon and half moon.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Then you're halfway through.
Yes. So it's like 14 days and 14 days. If you can remember that, you're good.
Yeah. Because the new moon comes right after the full moon. So they kind of overlap, which is why, ancient wisdom talks about it corresponding with your period and like all of that. But, I think like take it with a grain of salt, but like full moon, start, half moon, switch.
Yeah.
Simple. And, I think what I learned from the seed cycling practice that you introduced is it doesn't need to be complicated. And we also, our bodies have this inner knowing, right? So you might be listening to this and thinking, like that sounds like something I would love to do with, I don't know, some other seed or something else that's like nutrient dense that is like you're drawn to. You're like, oh, like cacao nibs. I don't know, whatever it is that you're thinking. But like you have a way of knowing what your body needs and focusing on nutrient dense foods and like cycling them in this like really approachable and doable way, I think is like so empowering and healthy.
Yes, I agree. And it goes back to that almost mindset of what can I add in and how can I add it in? Because first of all, focusing on nutrient density, you're always going to be optimizing your body when you are getting all of those rich nutrients inside of you. But then also just like taking it a step further and like creating these rituals and habits around it, it goes to show that like consistency is really key. Because if you just, let's say the cacao nibs, if you do it once and maybe again in 2 weeks, it doesn't have the same impact if you're mindful about it or mindful about including it diligently throughout your week. And so that's where seed cycling can be powerful because you're committing to do it daily, and then you already have like, 14 days, I can do that. 14 days, I can do the next batch. And you kind of just make a habit for yourself.
Yeah. And I think that that could be said about really any of our like healthy habits, whether it's exercise or vitamins or, mindfulness, meditation, all of the things that feel really good to us in our bodies.
Yeah.
We really see the benefit when we're consistent with them over a long period of time.
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. Where can people find you? And any last words?
Of course. You can find me at Nourished by Nutrition on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I'm also a little bit on TikTok, not so much, but the same name. And then my blog is Nourished by Nutrition, where I have all my healthy recipes. I share lifestyle content. But I'd love for you to follow along, be part of our community that we have. And then just thank you so much for having me. I really loved sharing about all of this. And then if anyone has questions, I'm always open to talk about it, to answer. I can go more into my story or just, give practical advice to help you out where you are at.
Thank you. And there are some really, really yummy recipes on the website, so be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.